Hey everyone, welcome to yet another webinar of National Space Society Mumbai chapter. For those who are unaware of NSS Mumbai, we are a non-profit organization aiming to create spacefaring civilization while promoting STEM and space with our various initiatives. Today we have with us as speaker our mentor and chief advisor, Dr. Ravi Margasahyam sir. He has served as the co-chair for Ground Safety Review Panel that ensures the safety of all the payloads and science experiments integrated on the way to the International Space Station at Kennedy Space Center. He has received the prestigious Silver Snoopy Award for his exceptional engineering and innovation on space shuttle. Dr. Ravi Margasahyam was also responsible for transporting the space shuttle vehicle to the pad and getting it ready for launch. His photograph is also displayed in a $100 million museum dedicated to space shuttle Atlantis at NASA Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center. Apart from his exceptional achievement, he is also VIP escort and international public speaker and has delivered lectures in over 30 plus countries around the world. Quite fascinating job to travel around the world and promote STEM and space, right? His multilingual capability with his knowledge and global promotion of NASA mission and vision earned him the title of KSC Goodwill Space Ambassador from Dr. Roy Bridges, astronaut and former center director at NASA Kennedy Space Center. Without any further ado, let's get started with the webinar. Over to you, sir.
Okay, good morning, folks. Really, it's a great pleasure, honor, and privilege for me to be here today. Really, NSS Mumbai has come a long way since we started in 2019, and we like to promote space awareness as well as exploration of space and living in space and working in space, things like that. NASA has many agendas, but today's agenda is mainly focused on what one can learn from some of our successes, failures, as well as what I call it successful failures. So with that, I want to just give you a prelude. First, I want to give this lecture is dedicated to my wife and daughter. They have spent a lot of time with me, working sacrifices when I was working in NASA. So it's my great honor and privilege to dedicate this lecture to them. Usually I do that for my parents and my father and mother once in a while, but today's lecture will be for my wife and daughter. So I think Netflix had a show called Dharmakshetra, and Dharmakshetra is like Chitragupta when he after the Kurukshetra war, everybody dies and they go to hell or heaven, I guess. And what happens there is Netflix made a very nice movie about what experiences we learned from Kurukshetra war, whether it happened or not, or whatever you want to say, it doesn't matter to me. What is more important is, in the end, we need to learn the lessons of success, failure, and successful failure. That's how we run our life. In typical engineering, 30 years later, all the good engineers or the old engineers go away, new engineers come. And it's always good to have new engineers, new ideas, new viewpoints. But also we need to make sure that we don't forget the past and forget the mistakes we made in the past and learn the lessons from the past. So you might as well believe or not believe when NASA landed on moon. To tell you the truth, ISRO, the Indian Space Agency, which I work very closely with, they have sent Chandrayaan and taken pictures of a lot of NASA artifacts on the moon. So we are not here to discuss that today, and I don't want anyone to bring it up either. But what we can do is we can learn the lessons from the Apollo program and how we successfully embarked on the space shuttle program and stuff like that. But right now, today, we'll stop at the lessons from Apollo. Then the next lecture we'll talk maybe in 3 months or 4 months about how we want to learn the lessons from this space shuttle program and maybe the ISS and living and working in space. And that is the charter of NSS Mumbai. So with that, I think Prathamesh is going to start the presentation with the video. Let's go.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
sequence about 10 or 15 seconds from still go as we monitor our status for it. Firing command coming in now. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. 2 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Oxidizer tanks in the second and third stages now have pressurized. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds. The third stage completely pressurized. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed launch report. It feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. Sequence start. 6.
Clipper Houston, go. We can see thruster firings now. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 6, down a half, line. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Okay, ready? Yeah. Okay, so folks, that's really a summary of what happened on Apollo. Just one small launch. I think the whole sequence was maybe less than 5 to 10 minutes for you if you are standing right on the ground. And I was not there to observe that launch, but I understand that it shook almost a 3-mile radius. The whole ground shook, and it was one of the most fantastic voyages mankind has taken. We all have people have eyes, but what NASA and JFK had was vision, basically. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the presentation outline. Rockets red glare, we talked a little bit about it. Sputnik really was a trigger to have the space race. Mercury, Gemini, Surveyor programs were like, you crawl before you walk, before you run, before you fly. And that was the space race. And really, as I mentioned, everybody has eyes, most people, but we don't have vision. And that's where the dream and vision of one person, really, I would say not one person, but one country or one agency like NASA really transformed what the world is today. You may believe or not believe the moon landing, but everything in this world, majority of the technologies you can see are attributed to NASA or indirectly or directly. So if I take away all your cell phone and all your mobile devices and all your internet and all your GPS communications, I just want you to go back to like Stone Age and see how you can live for even 1 minute, So that's what I want to tell you about the Apollo program. We talked a little bit about the planning, but most importantly, I want to talk about number 7, which is the life's leadership lessons. So in the end, one can go to Wikipedia and stuff like that, and you can read a lot about what NASA has done and what Apollo program has done. I personally worked on the space shuttle program, which is what which came right after the Apollo program, and really I just cannot explain to you how dangerous the jobs were, how difficult it was to launch a rocket. And many people launch a small rocket. We are launching real 7.5 million, 3.5 million kilos thrust rocket every month, every 2 months. So that was the shuttle program for you. Next slide, please. So next slide. So really giving you a historical perspective, I went to school in Bangalore, right about 70 to 80 miles or 62 miles to be precise, which is the distance to space from Earth. So there, Tipu Sultan was governing the Indian. He was the king of that particular area called Srirangapattan. And at that time, when the British attacked him, he was fighting the British, and he had modified some of the rockets coming from China, which came to India through fireworks and many other things, and eventually ended up in Tipu Sultan's hand. But he was very innovative. So innovation is very important in life. You have to innovate yourself first before you innovate something, basically. And so what he did was he modified the rocket to add metallic elements to that, add a stick to that, and make sure that it went on a particular trajectory, particular angle. So he had computed a lot of innovations and installed in those rockets. And he started firing rockets even before the British came. And British were really dumbfounded. In the end, what happened was the British took some of the spent rocket and elements and sent it to England, and Colonel Congreve, he did the engineering, reverse engineering. And then when America was in war with England at that time, because it was a British colony then, and they were putting rockets on America, using the same technology. And when Dr. Kalam went to one of the NASA centers, he saw this picture you see in the artwork here. And that picture is Tipu Sultan's people fighting the British, basically, and he was like thinking, how come this picture is here? And going back and reviewing all the documents, we found out that this is actually the reverse engineering done by Congreve later on, which is the same rockets that fell on America during the early part of the war. And Francis Key Scott, who was the American poet, he wrote Rocket's Red Glare. So in American National Anthem, there's a connection to Rocket's Red Glare. And that's exactly what this picture is symbolic of. So, if you start looking at connections around the world, you can always see some connections, and always have these connections as you go along in your lifetime. Next slide. So basically, Robert Goddard, he was really one of the quintessential person for America. Here, I'm going to talk a little bit more about United States rather than talk about Russia. Yes, until 1967, when the Russians failed to go to moon, Russia was leading the American space program all the time. So really, we are number 2, in this case. So, so this is the beginning of the liquid rocket engines. Next slide. In fact, nobody believed Goddard that you can go against Earth and go against gravity, basically. But now, we have this thing called Operation Paperclip during the World War, when Warren von Braun, working for the Nazis and stuff like that, he was doing the V2 rocket to support the war effort in Peenemünde. And basically, after the war, we got about maybe 200, 300 engineers from Germany who came to America. In fact, von Braun also wanted to come to America instead of going to Russia. And then Russians also got some rocket parts as well as drawings. So they had a set of drawings, we had a set of drawings. So, both evolved basically, but we got the best of the best, cream of the cream people here to America. That's a beautiful picture of a first photo of Earth, taken in 1946. By a V2 rocket. Until then, we never saw the Earth in its own grandeur, basically. Always people like Incas and Mayas, they want to build things like Machu Picchu. They want to see the whole Earth in the from the eyes of the condor. So big picture, that's what we call about it. And this pale blue dot, which Carl Sagan talked about, it's looks so beautiful from the ISS. You must have seen hundreds of millions of pictures taken by ISS, which I was part of the ISS program. I launched the ISS components from 1998 all the way to its completion. And even after 20 years, it's still flying in space. So next slide. So now Wernher von Braun comes to America, but what happens in 57 was really a shock to America. Like you can say, a kick in the pants. in your own life, you need a trigger to make sure that you succeed in life. And there is something which says a trigger. In my case, I was living in Kabul in the 60s. I came back to Mumbai and I saw this Bollywood movie called Sangam. I fell in love with the heroine and the hero, the way he was flying planes. If you have seen the movie, if you haven't seen it, go and see it. So then he tries to marry this girl and finally ends up marrying the girl and goes around the world flying, basically. So two things stuck in my brain, that if I become a pilot, I can marry a beautiful girl and go around the world. Guess what? Both happened. I married a beautiful girl, went around the world, but never became a pilot, And so it's kind of but the dream is alive. Dream is always alive in you. That trigger brought me to working with becoming an engineer later on in India, and then from India we came to America to get my degrees in aerospace, which led me to work in Boeing and stuff like that. So really, the dream is alive. That trigger really helped me to come to America. But what happened in Sputnik was really Sputnik, when it started flying over America, people thought that this could be a bomb, Russian bomb, and it could bomb, bomb on America, and so they were really afraid. Next slide. And really, with that, we had a big issue with Russians taking over the lead, and America was way behind. And that's where, if you look at history of manned space flight, the Project Mercury began because of Sputnik, basically. We didn't like Russia sending a probe over America, but the next thing they could put a bomb over America. So three main programs started in this general time frame between 1958 on. 1958 is where NASA was formed, actually. I was born in 53, so NASA is sort of a younger brother to me. I had no clue what NASA was until I came to America. Even after the moon program, we didn't worry about it too much in India, except some of those astronauts did come to Mumbai after landing Neil Armstrong and everybody, who I met much, much later. So Project Mercury was a quintessential program to make sure that we selected the astronauts. We wanted to put at least one person in space and stuff like that. Until then, all our rockets were failing, basically. And NASA Kennedy Space Center, where I worked for 30 years, it is really a historic site where you can see some of these early rocket launch pads and early failures, like Apollo 1, or even some of the early rockets which flew like Mercury Redstone, which flew missiles, monkeys and chimps, and whatever Russians did, we wanted to do the thing, but they were already ahead of us many, many times. So basically, 1958 was the start of the American manned space program, as we call it. Until then, we tried many, many rockets and they would all fail. So next slide. So really, Project Gemini was a precursor. So if you think about Project Mercury, we had only one person go on Mercury, whereas Project Gemini, we wanted to send more than one person, maybe two, trying to do many, many things, like how do we survive in space? How do we keep astronauts safe in space? How do we rendezvous or dock in space? How can we do extravehicular activities? And all these things were not really done under Mercury program. So really, this was a two-man idea, sending two people to space rather than one person. Again, I just want to give you overall context. All this time, the Russians were winning. As you know, by 1961, Yuri Gagarin already had beaten us. He was the first man in space, basically. Then Alan Shepard was number 2, basically. But unfortunately, nobody remembers the second person. You can never get a second chance to make a first good impression, as they say. And that's where really America got into a kick in the behind more and more when Yuri Gagarin went to space. And so that's when Kennedy started talking about the space program, really in a way that will significantly overpower the Russians. mind you, at that time, really, we didn't have a big rocket to go anywhere. We didn't have, we didn't know where the moon was, and I mean, what I meant was the conditions of the moon were, we didn't know how to do EVA, how to do docking. We didn't know guidance, navigation, and control systems, and many areas were not developed at all, basically. And even landing a man on moon would require many vehicles like the the moon vehicle itself. It's impossible to design all this in a very short time, and that's when Kennedy said we have to go to moon and come back, send a man to moon and come back within a decade. And you saw that speech by him. Next slide. So now Alan Shepard, as I said, was number 2 again to Yuri Gagarin. Yes, it was a very short flight, but at least, we had, first American in space. Next slide. So here is a nutshell of 1961 speech by Kennedy. And at that time, as you see, his plan to go to moon was very far-fetched, as you say, as you can see, there was a lot of learning ahead. We were having problems even on the ground. We were failing rockets and stuff like that. And we'll talk about Apollo 1 failure a little bit later. So we didn't have a powerful rocket even to go to moon. And we didn't know whether to do a rendezvous in Earth orbit or moon orbit, what kind of rocket it is, how big the rocket has to be, can it go and land on the moon, can it take off from the moon, what is the soil conditions, can it sink on the moon? All these conditions were not even available, and even people like Werner von Braun, who was really a genius in planning and everything, didn't really appreciate the difficulty there, but he had already designed some of the big elements we need, like the crawler transporter, which can carry about 18 million pounds or 9 million kilos. He had designed a mobile launch platform. He had designed a big building called the VAB, Vehicle Assembly Building in NASA, where we can assemble all this, 6 million parts of Apollo Saturn V rocket. It was one of the most powerful rockets at that time. And so we'll talk a little bit about it later. So this is the condition we were in 1961 when Kennedy made his biggest speech. Okay, next slide. So, then we wanted to make sure that we at least send to people around the Earth and to see how they can sustain or survive basically in space. And by 1962, when John Glenn went, we are already sending some of the probes to the moon, trying to understand, what are the conditions of the moon. As I said earlier, NASA believes in the philosophy of crawl before you walk, before you run, before you fly, basically. So we were sending things like rangers and surveyors to the moon. Then we sent one man with the Mercury program, then the Gemini program. So basically, every time we learned, it was an incremental growth, incremental learning, which solidified our capability to land a man on the moon. So basically, in your own life, you have to crawl before you walk, before you run, before you fly, and that's a philosophy even I have followed, and it's been successful. So just remember that it just didn't happen that one day America got up and said, "Oh, Russia launched Sputnik, so we are going to go to the moon." No, it didn't happen. There had to be a vision. I told you, people have eyes, but they don't have vision. And basically, this is what the vision of America was, to make such a big impact, change the playing field, where nobody can achieve that. Once you, people can run marathons, yes, but if you can run 3 marathons in the same time or same day, that'd be amazing feat, or climb like 8,000 meter peaks, like the Sherpa who climbed 14 peaks in less than 7 months. Yes, I met Tenzing Norgay who climbed Mount Everest, but that's just one time. This guy climbed 7 peaks, 8,000 meters high in 7 months. That is, nobody can beat that. That kind of impact we wanted to make on the world. Next slide. So really, Gemini had many records. That's a beautiful picture of Saudi Arabia and Africa, and that's the place, Horn of Africa, where mankind originated about 100,000 years ago, and he spread all over the world, or even millions of years ago, mankind evolved from apes and that stuff like that. And incidentally, this picture really symbolizes that how far the mankind has come in its quest to explore not only our own Mother Earth, but also the entire solar system. So now we know Voyager 1 has gone beyond the solar system into interstellar space and stuff like that, almost 15 billion miles away. So next slide. So really the Surveyor program, as I told you earlier, was looking at the feasibility of landing a robotic craft and stuff like that. But really it was unmanned, and everything had to be done unmanned, because later on we wanted to make sure that these things could ensure our plan to land a man on the moon, basically. Incidentally, in my office where I worked in Kennedy Space Center, right behind that, all this testing you see up there with Pete Conrad, well, this is that's a real one, but some of these similar testings were done on an artificial ground we call the moon pad, and it was just an ordinary area near the swamp, and that's where things happened. I mean, it was like when I walk inside the Kennedy Space Center, walk around the launch pad, I walk around the pad in the whole center, which is about 140,000 acres. There was tremendous amount of history and technology, developed right there. Just to give you an impression that when we started working on the moon program, people were not worried about their job, or they worried about their money, or they worried about their family. Everybody took, if they didn't finish the work, they could take it home and work inside their garage and keep on working whole night to make a part for the Apollo program. So why I'm telling you this is because that is the passion we want to instill in you in anything you want to do. I'm not saying you want to become an astronaut, or or work for NASA. Whatever you want to do in life, be the best. Next slide. So really, rocket launching is one of the most dangerous businesses. If you haven't launched a rocket, I want you to come to KSC and look at how big, humongous rockets. Apollo 11 rocket was almost 8 million pounds of thrust, which is almost 4 million kilos, and shuttle was almost very close to it with 3.5 million kilos. But what the difference was Apollo was a liquid rocket engine, so you wouldn't hear the thunder and the noise generated by the shuttle, which was two solid rocket boosters, which really, along with the liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, it was a hydrogen bomb really we are sitting on. Even our first astronaut, John Young, was telling NASA, saying on STS-1 in April 12, 1981, saying, NASA, you must be crazy. You're going to put me on top of this space shuttle and launch my bottom. And I'm going to blow up, that's what you want me to do, I'm not going to do it. So that's how crazy this business was, and just integrating this rocket. I never flew in space, but I've sent about 600, 700 astronauts, and just to be part of this integration process, systems engineering, integration, moving the rocket to the pad on the shuttle program really symbolizes what I missed on the Apollo program, because I was not in America until then. Next slide. So now we come to Apollo 1. So really, Kennedy got assassinated pretty soon, right after in '63, and his dream, we had to keep it alive. And now, we were pushing basically with the Mercury and the Gemini program, and already the Russians were beating us. Not only by '65, they were doing the EVA, but by '63, '61, Gagarin went up in space. Then '63, Valentina Tereshkova, and then Alexei Leonov in '65. He already did the EVA and he knew how to go around and stuff like that. So now really NASA was way behind. So we are pushing. And on the left side, left corner, you see the launch pad where the Apollo 1 rocket was ready to be ready for space, basically, and getting ready for launch. And one fine morning, we're we are doing some test. We call it the plug outs test, and we had pure oxygen in this module you see on the bottom. And basically, there was a lot of wiring there, and some of the wirings were, people walked on it and stuff like that, and it was wires were exposed. And now we have pure oxygen environment, which was not necessary. So really, many times NASA looks at failures in two ways. One is called proximate failure, which is technical in nature, and root cause analysis, which is more human error. And in this case, the human error, really, we didn't have to have liquid, pure oxygen environment in the Apollo module. And we did that, and we killed the 3 astronauts. And in fact, Roger Chaffee, who was one of the people who killed, his daughter worked with me in NASA for many years, almost 30 years. So when I took a lot of tours, including Dr. Kalam and many kings and queens and people to see this Apollo 1 program, a launch pad. You literally shed tears, because you see what happened to these people. They would have been heroes on the next launch, and now they're nobody. So we have 3 benches assembled right next to the pad there, and people give their homage to some of the fallen astronauts. But what is good about NASA is we never accept defeat. We don't accept failures. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah.
So you can see the slides, right?
Yeah, I can see the slide. Sorry. Yeah. So now we come to Apollo program, and really, what happened was Russia never went to space because in '67 they already wanted to put many engines on their rockets, and these engines were not tested. And that was the beauty about Wernher von Braun. He wanted to, he came up with the philosophy of test what you fly what you test. So basically we always flew what we tested. And even the big Saturn V rocket, there's a joke in NASA about, tennis shoes helped NASA to go to the moon. Yeah, it is true, because Wernher von Braun wanted to know the natural frequency of vibration of the structure of the whole Apollo rocket, because we had a lot of these problems called pogo problems, where as the rocket fuel expands, as the rocket moves up, it becomes lighter and lighter because we have burnt all the fuel. Now there's a horizontal oscillation or longitudinal oscillation of 18 Hertz or 18 cycles per second, which can literally burst the rocket open. So it is very important to understand the whole rocket, including all the parts. That's why NASA is more successful than many companies or agencies, is because we do thorough testing and we understand the systems engineering part very well. And that's what we did basically. And why Russia couldn't go to the moon is they had 30+ engines on their rocket, and then one of the bolts fell off from one of the engines, and then it got sucked into the one of the other engines, and then it was a catastrophe. So they had failures after failures after failures of their rockets right on the launch pad, even before they lifted off. So that's why Russia had, didn't do the testing properly, and that's what America, was doing it, and NASA was doing it because of von Braun. And these N1 engines were very bad scenario for Russia. So now there was a question whether we do a lunar orbit rendezvous or do a Earth orbit rendezvous. So von Braun's idea was to make sure it can go into space, go around the Earth, and come up with the EVA, so he can send 2 big rocket parts to the moon, and then from moon you can take off from the moon. But the parts were very heavy, and we didn't need to carry all those parts. So one of the engineers working for NASA, he came up with the concept of lunar orbit rendezvous. So basically we would go up there, and the command module will be going around the moon, and then the lunar module will undock and land on the moon, come back and dock with the command module, and then we come back home. And as we are going up and up very close to the moon, around 220,000 miles or whatever, we are expending all the other parts which are not necessary. So in rocket business, weight is a big penalty. So that's one of the major things. Even people like Wernher von Braun sometimes can fail in their thinking, because you may have a tunnel vision and stuff like that. So it's very important that to look at a bigger picture, look at all the possibilities thinking. Like, when I was growing up in India, my teacher said 1 question, 1 answer. In NASA, we say not one question, many answers. You know why? Because 1 answer may be the best answer out of 10, but the other 9 will create a new innovation, basically. And that's why you need 1 question, many answers, or many possibilities. So next slide. Okay, so this is a beautiful picture of lunar, Earth from Apollo 8, actually. So when Apollo 8 started, when we were pushing to get Apollo 1 and Apollo 8, Apollo rockets going to the moon, we had a problem because we were already afraid that Russia was trying to. They made a fake announcement. They sent a sound message from a rocket from near the moon to Earth, thinking that America would think, the CIA would think that we are already landing on the moon. So this was a problem for NASA. So we were pushing, and that's when really NASA said, okay, let's send Apollo 8 very close to the moon, so that way we can at least say that we have orbited with people around the moon and stuff like that. And that was one of the. But this is the first time we have taken a full-scale image of Earth from moon. And this is called the Earthrise image, and this is one of the finest images I'm sure you have seen in many times. And the reason for Apollo 8 to go was they wanted to. And when Apollo 8 went to the moon, there was no lunar module at all, so really we couldn't land on the moon, and we couldn't bring anybody up there. So because the lunar module was way behind schedule by one of our contractors, so that was the idea, to beat the Russians. But then obviously. We found out that Russians were lying to us, lying to the world, saying that they sent a man to the moon and landed him on the moon. So next slide. So really, Apollo, this is the picture of Apollo, and here's the Eagle Tranquility Base. I mean, this is fantastic images of moon we took after Apollo 11 landed on it. And in fact, I remember reading in papers in India, in Mumbai in 1969, after the moon landing in July, the astronauts Neil Armstrong and those people came to Mumbai, and all 3 astronauts and Buzz Aldrin. Much later, I got to meet, when I joined NASA in '89, I got to meet Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. I in fact shook hands with both of them, and Buzz is still around. I guess we still talk to him. And so next slide.
4.5, 5.5, 30 seconds. Okay, engine stop. The Eagle has landed.
So astronauts on the moon, they walked on the surface, they took pictures, they collected rock samples, deployed science instruments, things like that. So all this stuff, artifacts, you can see it by Chandrayaan. Indian Space Agency has sent their probes to take pictures of moon, and they have taken the artifact from not only Apollo 11 but subsequent Apollos, Apollo missions. We'll go to the next slide. So now comes we had great success in Apollo 11. We found out that NASA was the first one to land on moon. America was #1, and now in at least first time. And then came a real shock, in 1970, just a year later. But for me, everybody knows about Apollo 13. I'm sure you've seen the movie, and it's one of the classics, I would say. What really sets Apollo 11 was a success story. Apollo 13 for me was what we call as a successful failure story. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. So successful failure, why success? Well, failure because we couldn't, our mission was to land on the moon, we couldn't do it. Success because we brought the 3 men back. So basically, Apollo 13 is a classic example of what humans can do, human intelligence, imagination, and ingenuity. These 3 men, they were stuck, beyond, the human hands in the moon orbit, basically 200 miles, 1,000 miles away from Earth. But it's a sheer imagination of ground system engineers in Kennedy Space Center to Canada to UK to all over the world, including Johnson Space Center, to come together as one entity and rescue these people. Many a times, people said, we'll just go home, we'll forget about these people, and it will be an orbital tomb of these three men circling the moon forever and ever. That would be a very, very sad story for NASA's image and NASA's caliber. And so basically we had to turn that around, and we couldn't give up. So failure was not an option. Yes, if those words have to be careful, failure was not an option for Apollo 13 only. In life, we do fail, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So failure is okay as long as you learn the lessons from that. And so for me, Apollo 13 was one of the finest hours of NASA, but also finest hours of what mankind can do when somebody is in real trouble. If you fall in a pool, I can give you a hand and get you up. But what happens when you are 200,000 miles away? How do we get you back? And don't forget, all the programs were written that way at that time with a very minimal computer stuff. To go to the moon and land on the moon, they were not written to dynamically change their course and do a GNC course correction and then come back to Earth. It never happened, and it had to be done on a dime, as we call it. So next slide. So let's look at a few slides. I'll quickly run through this. We are already caught up with quite a bit. Let's move on. Next slide. So we have to define, when you come to Apollo mission, I want to define these three things, and this summarizes the whole thing. You have the robotic precursors. I call it the crawl, before you walk, before you run, before you fly, something like that. You have the Ranger and the Surveyor missions, hard landings, soft landings, how to study the oils and pictures, chemical analysis. Then we have the three major programs, the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo program, 1-man crew, 2-man crew, 3-man crew, land on the moon. 1-man crew is just suborbital. Second one is to do all the EVA, so get to the second stage of the things. Then the next stage would be really to take 3-man crew and land on the moon, basically. Some of the catastrophic failures which happened in between. Neil Armstrong almost died on what we call as the X-15 flight, which is a Mach 25 plus flight. LLRV stands for Lunar Lander and Rowing Vehicle. Basically, it's a test vehicle which we tested the lunar lander on, and he almost got killed. Gemini 8 also, he had a problem with his docking, and he almost got killed. So 3 times he came very close to, and in the end, he still became the first person to land on moon, basically put his footprints on the moon. So, amazing feat. Neil Armstrong, when he had a problem with LLRV, his whole LLRV crashed in Kennedy Space Center, and he just walks out because he had a parachute. And next morning he comes to work as if nothing happened, So that is the tenacity of the people we had in NASA, that we never accepted defeat, never accepted failure. We're not afraid of failure and or fear and stuff like that. So this, you can use it for your own life also, basically, how you crawl before you walk, before you run, before you fly, and then if something goes wrong in between, keep on redoing it. Next slide. So let's run next few slides very fast, Pratmesh. Yeah, so basically this is a different way of looking at the same picture. You have the success on one side, the failure. So on this, oh, sorry, go back. Go back one. Okay, so we have success on one side, failure on the other side. Then we have the so basically, if I want you to read a book by Henry Petrosky, he talks about design being a human activity, and it's always an imperfect one. Everything we have in this world is designed by somebody. Like, engineers, scientists study the world as is, but engineers design everything. So there is always a human error involved. So what we have to understand is the role played and by and reaction to the anticipation of failure is very quintessential in achieving success, basically. Next slide. So you learn more from one failure than 1,000 successes. And can you imagine when Edison failed 1,000 times, he would have learned many times, right? So that's what failure gives you. So this is the iceberg failure of model. Just click on it again. So you have the no harm events, and then click on the slide. Yeah, click on the slide. Next, click on the next slide. Yeah. So okay, now these are the what I want to impress upon you is here is a coin, basically the heads and tails, we call it. Tails is failure, heads is success, and then edge is successful failure, basically. So success and failure and successful failure, they're all three sides of a coin, basically. And success through failure, is what really life is about, and it is important to learn the failure lessons. Like map a maze, a 2D maze. What happens is, you go on straight, and then you turn right or left, and then you come to a barrier, then you turn right. So you keep on tracing the maze, which is a 2D system. Now you imagine 3D system, and I don't know how many system, dimensions the real life has. So you have to be prepared for all this mapping the maze. The sooner you map the maze by failures, you can be successful. Next slide. So really, we talked a little bit about the plug outs test on Apollo 1 fire. So this was a major crisis. Next slide. Successful, that was a failure, total failure. Apollo 1, this is a success. One small step caption. I mean, you can just look at the picture, and that picture symbolizes what mankind can do. So just don't get swayed by people telling you nonsense about we never landed on the moon and all that. Just think what you can do. Just look at my own life. 50 years ago, when I went to school, I didn't even have a slide rule. I used to use log tables. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have internet. I didn't have anything, And now, we are launching probes to faraway places. In my own life, I've launched to the entire solar system, all the probes. So next slide. So this is a example of Apollo 13, which is this is a successful failure. We talked about. You have seen the words, heard the words Houston, we have had a problem, basically. And we always have a joke with Houston and Kennedy. Kennedy Space Center is in Florida, and Houston is in Texas. So we say, Houston, you may have a problem, but Kennedy, we always have a solution. So there's a internal fight between two NASA centers. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Yeah. So now we come to really the most important slide, which brings us to the end of the lecture almost. Basically, I just want to dwell quite a bit on this particular slide and really talk a little bit about all the steps here, 10 things, and really that's the focus of my lecture today. So basically, as I told you earlier, it's all about learning something from your experience. What I'm saying? If you don't learn anything from life, nothing matters really. And in the end, we do all these extraordinary things so that we can go beyond that. Basically go beyond what we have accomplished. Don't reinvent the wheel, as they say. When I met Tenzing Norgay in 1973, I was 20 years old. He said, Ravi, I already climbed Mount Everest, so don't even think about Mount Everest. Come up with your own peak, climb a different peak, And I said, what is there? What else is there? I don't think there's any other peak. Now I know that Mount Olympus Mons on Mars is 3 times higher than Mount Everest. So yeah, we still haven't climbed that, But my peak was basically, coming to NASA and following all these philosophies and learning about it, and now trying to disseminate the same knowledge. But my peak was just being the best NASA engineer one could. That's the thing. So now let's talk about many players who really helped Apollo 11. So I'm going to dwell on this slide and just don't have to go through all this. You don't have to remember a lot of things. I'm going to go very fast. I may have about 10 minutes to finish this lecture. So adaptive leadership, So Von Braun was one of the most adaptive leader. He, even as a kid, when he was 13 years old, he was creating the future, looking at the future. He's solving possibilities on how mankind can live and work in space. He said, space flight, if it's not for me, let it be for others. So he already was thinking about designing some of the artifacts like VAB, mobile launcher, crawler transporter, the launch pad. He was already designing all this, looking at the pyramids from all over the world, like the pyramids of Giza and stuff like that, the bent pyramid of, in Saqqara and stuff like that, Zozer's pyramid and stuff like that. So he always created alternative futures. He didn't have a tunnel vision. He had a broad vision, basically. And if one thing didn't work, he would look at many, many different things. He was looking at all possible futures, all possible paths to success. So his viewpoint was 30,000 feet, and from there he wanted to look at and solve these problems. That's why we in NASA and the famous, we said the eagle has landed. Why eagle? They could have taken any bird in America, but eagle has the highest honor to be the most successful bird and most powerful bird, and it can go very high in the sky, and live about 80 years. So that's why we called it eagle. So eagle's viewpoint, basically. So this is what adaptive leader is important. So in your life, you have to be an adaptive person. Even if you don't want to become a leader, be an adaptive person and look for many possibilities. So possibilities thinking is very important. The next one is visionary. JFK, I told you there are many people who have eyes but no vision, basically. So why? What made JFK different? Nothing really. He had to consult still Wernher von Braun, NASA, and many other people to make his vision. But he was taking a risk when it when we were ahead, when we were behind, Russia, and we were getting beaten. So he had to change the level playing field. Like imagine a lot of Indians listening to this program. We have a cricket pitch, and we have a fast bowler and a spin bowler, and we don't. This fast bowler is not doing, and he's not winning the game for us. Then we go to a different pitch and we try to spin the ball like crazy and then win it. So he wanted to change the spectrum of work completely. He said, today your goal would be like, okay, I want to send a probe or a drone or some kind of system on Mount Olympus Mons. Maybe I can climb it, but I'll send something. That would be something like that. Like a good example would be like I worked for Boeing Helicopters, built the Chinooks and the V-22, and now looking at Leonardo da Vinci 500 years ago, he's my hero. He was flying helicopters and trying to think about helicopters. Now I worked in helicopters in the 80s. And now within next 40 years, less than 50 years, we were flying helicopter on Mars. Can you imagine that? In my own lifetime. So what he did was he changed the level playing field, but he put logic, emotion, credibility all in one small area, and he put a seed of hope, and he created some fear. He also played the difficulty card, but also gave courage to NASA, courage to the people. And for all people who have given TED Talks, I've never given a TED Talk. I don't know why they haven't called me yet. I've gone around to 40 countries, but I never did a TED Talk. Apparently his talk was 17.48 minutes. So TED Talks came up with 18 minutes as their number. But for me, I think 18 minutes is too long too. It's 3 minutes is maximum. That's how we train our astronauts. So in the end, what he did was we chose to go to the moon, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. And what he wanted to repeat the same thing, he used like we chose to go to the moon 3 times. It was like, taking a hammer and beating on your head and stuff like that. His goals were very smart, called specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive. So this is what created him one of the noble causes of I think this is one of the most historic feats in the history of mankind today. And I don't, yes, we can go to Mars, we can go to many other places, but in 1969, with the technology we had, going to moon was I think by far the best engineering feat mankind will ever do, I think, So I think the next one is like building my Taj Mahal in space, which is ISS. So that's a different story. So I'm sure Shah Jahan would be mad. He says, I want that Taj Mahal in space, I don't want this one on the ground. So self-innovation. James Webb was, whose name goes with the James Webb telescope. He was a great leader. He didn't even want to take to be the leader of this organization, but the president of the United States forced him. So he wanted, always said that there is no I in the team. Team is spelled T-E-A-M. There is no I in the team. So he brought the best of the best people. So he traveled quite a bit extensively. There's near Greece, there's a place called Apollo, Temple of Apollo near Delphi. It says, know thyself and nothing in excess. These are the two maxims he stood by, and these were very important. That he always thought that by giving empowerment to the people, that he can come out ahead. And so what he did was he created field centers. So until then, NASA was just one center. Now he created many centers like Kennedy Space Center, Johnson. If you have seen Shah Rukh Khan's movie, Swadesh, he's from Goddard and Langley and stuff like that. So we call him the man who ran the moon. So next slide. Oh, not next slide, sorry. Next item is Supreme Control, Chris Kraft, who really ran the Launch Control Center. He was part of what they call a space technology group, and he wanted to make sure that we sent probes to space and brought them back safely, like people to space, including probes, or we call it the human payloads, but the human payloads are the most important payloads for us. So basically, one time when I think Glenn went to space, we had a big problem, and then we had to bring him back because of some issues, and everybody overruled him from Houston. He was in charge of the launch control, or mission control rather, not launch control. Launch control is in Kennedy, mission control is in Houston. So then he went to the president of the United States and said that nobody can really overrule me. So he wanted to be a T-shaped leader. T-shaped leader is like, the vertical line is this expertise. Like in my case, the vertical line would be something like to do with vibroacoustics or rocket noise and vibration. And the horizontal would be like knowing like about railroads and mining and helicopters and commercial airplanes and NASA in 10 years. That is the horizontal part, looking at project management, systems engineering, and things like that. So he was very good T-shaped leader, and that's what you want to be in life. Just to give you a perspective, until T plus 6.5 seconds, the control stays with Houston, Kennedy Space Center. That's where the launches happen. After T plus 6 seconds, the control goes to Houston, and they take over. The launching basically. So Von Braun was also a T-shaped leader. Not only he knew expertise in building V2 rockets and thereby Apollo Saturn V rockets and stuff, but he also was a generalist. And he knew many skills, management skills, how to bring people, how to assign the right people, and things like that. Number 5, we need to understand the social capital. So as a manager or as a leader, you want to give diversity, and don't think that somebody with a brown skin like me would be not fit for NASA or something like that. We want to make sure that many diversity brings many new ideas, the possibilities thinking. And Hidden Figures, the movie you saw, I opened the premiere of that in Abu Dhabi, and the Crown Prince's grandson came to the movie, and he said, Dr. Ravi, just a great movie, And I was telling him, I said, Your Highness, can I tell you a story? I said, yeah, go ahead, please be my guest. And I said, I used to live in Abu Dhabi in '67 when you are not even born, and my dad's house was bigger than your dad's house. And he started laughing. He said, I'm not going to shoot you or put you in the jail, I'm going to elevate you. I'll make you a citizen of Abu Dhabi, So this is what diversity means. So Hidden Figures, just because they were black or whatever, color has no barrier. Just like our astronauts, when they are going around the world, they're saying there's no boundaries on Earth as we go in this space. At Mark 25, where is India? By the time you say India or America or Liechtenstein, you would be in a different continent, basically. So don't think that this cultural capital, what is important is NASA understood that these people are very important for the social capital. They are very important for the benefit of NASA and stuff like that. So, in my case, I was the first Indian born person ever to work on the NASA launch pad. There was no Indian working on that. Maybe there was one or two black people, colored African American people, but no Indians at all. I was the first Indian to work, and they also made me a VIP tour guide. That was very hard to get in. So really, it was to their own advantage that they looked at the knowledge and stuff like that. They also encouraged me to work with the astronauts and stuff like that. So one thing leads to another thing, and then you give your 100%. So if you're a manager, make sure that you do cater to that kind of diversity. Next one, scale of reciprocity. It's very important that we give awards. See, everybody who works under you or for you, has a different motivation to work. In my case, even my wife today says, if I cut Ravi, there's no blood coming out of his body, only NASA comes out. That is the passion. And even NASA didn't give me any money. I would be still working for NASA or for 30 years. And they did pay me well, so it's not that was not a problem. But what I'm trying to say is, you give them awards. So suppose the person doesn't care much for money, give him awards. So one of the awards NASA came up with was called the Silver Snoopy Award. A Silver Snoopy is a Snoopy dog pin from Disney, and this pin goes to space, and then it comes down on Earth, and it is given to one of the best engineers for that year. Only 1% of NASA gets it. You never get it twice. And I got that award from Pamela Melroy, one of my astronaut friends. As I said, I've launched about 600 astronauts, and Pamela is my hero, and she's been my mentor. And now she runs NASA as a number 2 person. She's the deputy administrator, reporting directly to the President of the United States. And we still have connections. So, this is the beauty about giving empowership to a person. It's a trade-off for a very small pin, which went to space. And this astronaut comes from Houston and gives it to you. It made headlines in Mumbai and many places, and then you are branded as the best engineer for NASA, So sometimes you have to give awards to, achieve some things. Next one, disaster leadership is a really classic example of what Apollo 1 really meant. NASA never gives up, as I said. It's we always made sure that, as I said earlier, there were 2 types of failure: root cause analysis and proximate cause analysis. In this case, if you take a look at Challenger and Columbia, Challenger was a O-ring problem. Columbia, where Kalpana Chawla died, was a problem with the foam hitting. So NASA management knew that. So basically, yes, foam hitting was the real cause, which is called the proximate cause, engineering technical cause, but really the failure was due to management's error. And you have to stand up, and you have to have the conviction to make sure that you stand up and tell why this thing happens, because all the managers have this thing called group think. They, one says yes and everybody says they are a yes man. We forget the warning signs for both for Apollo as well as Apollo. We didn't need the oxygen, pure oxygen, because we used it on the Mercury and Gemini. We used it, reused it. Many problems with the O-ring problem, many problems with foam hitting. General consensus, we don't want a dissenting opinion. People don't want to stand up because they may get fired and all that. So one good example in 2009, when we had the last repair mission for Hubble, we had a lot of failures on the launch pad where we lost 3,000 bricks. You can Google STS-124 launch, and we lost 3,000 bricks, which almost came and hit the rocket. And this was after Kalpana Chawla's launch in 2003, which was STS-107. And I went against the entire NASA management to shut the launch pad. And they were almost ready to fire me. Ended up in the hospital. I have a 7-inch, 8-inch scar on my heart. It didn't happen because of that. I had problems, but the stress caused that problem. But what is important is at least I stood up and I made sure they put some sensors inside the launch pad. And sensors were very cheap, $200,000 versus each launch cost me, 1 day delay cost me $1 million, and launch cost me almost $500 million per launch. So, and what is the cost when we lose somebody like Kalpana Chawla and the whole crew? So now we also have like tough and competent people like Gene Kranz in the Apollo days, and that is also very important that they have to stand up and say, look guys, we cannot make mistakes and stuff like that. George Low for risk and reward management was a great guy. He was very important because when Apollo 1 happened, he sort of took some demotions and stuff like that, and he was the quintessential to think, saying that even if NASA couldn't go to the moon and land on the moon, he said, let's look at a module to go to the moon and at least go around the moon. So that's what Apollo 8 happened, and he was reframing a question. He said, can we just navigate to the moon and go into the lunar orbit, not even burn the engines, maybe burn the engines, let the computer program do its stuff. So we would have tested everything before man lands on the moon. So by doing that, at that time, I think I told you Apollo 8 time, there was no lunar module at all. So there was no way the Apollo 8 crew could land on the moon. So at least by doing that, you would have accomplished 75 to 80% of the mission, which was derived from Kennedy's speech in 1961, that within 10 years, we have to go to the moon and come back, So this was like a real direct activity, So he framed the questions saying, his question was like, can we get to the moon, without really landing on the moon, and that was the question which many people were afraid to ask, and that is where, you as a manager want to reframe a question. A lot of times, I think there was one author who said that in the 21st century, knowing all the answers is not important, but asking the right question, and in case of Low, he said, instead of the question saying how to speed a sequence of missions planned, he said, what if we went to the moon and didn't land, So it was the same question, same thing. So I'll repeat that again. Question A was how to speed up the sequence of mission to land on the moon. Instead, he said, what if we went to the moon and didn't land, So these were same two sides of the coin, but he put it in a different way that he could solve that problem. This is a framing problem. It's called the reframing the question, And why we don't do that? Because we have a group think, and which really messes up everything, basically. Last two, success through failures. Apollo 11, we had talked about it already, and I don't want to repeat that, but that's really a great example of what mankind can do, when nobody in the right mind in NASA in 1961 or even 67 thought that we would land on moon within 10 years, So last but not least, the crisis response, which we also talked about. What strikes me is these three men were beyond the physical reach of humankind, but not beyond the reach of human intelligence, imagination, and ingenuity. If you just remember that, you can go many places in your own life. So I'll repeat that. These three men were beyond the reach of humankind, human hands or humankind, but not beyond the reach of human intelligence, imagination, and ingenuity. So if you remember that, you'll go somewhere. You'll climb Mount Olympus Mons, I can guarantee you. Next slide. Yeah. And really, this next slides, I'm not going to go, but just will spend 1 second on it. And next slide. I'm not seeing the next slide.
I guess there is a delay.
Huh? Or delay?
I
okay.
guess there is a delay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So basically, we'll just run through for 1 second. Let me tell you when to move to the next slide. So we had a clear objective. We picked the best people, best team players, right stuff. So my quote is always like, if you want to have the right stuff in space, which is the astronauts, you have to have the right stuff on the right staff on the ground, which is us. We are the hidden figures of NASA, basically. I was astronaut maker for Pamela Melroy and Kalpana Chawla and many hundred astronauts. So we are what we call as the visible plume is the astronauts, but we are the hidden sounds or the invisible sounds or inaudible sounds. Why NASA is great is because we train, we have contingency plans, plan A, plan B, plan C, but we also have the right mindset. We always have adaptive plan B and things like that. Next slide. These slides you can just go through and review it. That main slide earlier was what I was. So project management lessons, very important that you have lines of communication open. Always have a plan B, plan C. NASA has plan A to plan I. So if the shuttle takes off and something happens to it, it can land what they call as RTLS contingency, return to launch site right away, or it can go over Atlantic Ocean, land in Europe. If it comes around the Pacific Ocean, then we can land in Guam or land in California. So many landing contingencies. So team communication is very important. Risk taking is very important. Lessons from failures, learned from failures have to be recorded. There's no T, I in the team. Be a T leader. Next slide. So crisis innovation. Again, we talked about Gene Kranz a little bit here. So you have to delegate. Not B. If plan A fails, the plan B was going to the moon. Plan B was never there, but it was an adaptive plan B, basically. So really, the failure was in plan A. So when he says failure is not an option, what he meant was plan A was already had failed, and his famous words were after failure is not an option, which was only for plan B, which meant that we have to get the astronauts back safely. So just don't get confused that, oh, in my life I failed, in the exams. I also failed many times in the exam. Okay, so I was telling somebody yesterday, I got 35% or 50% marks in my high school and college days. So don't think that we are all failures. Same, even Thomas Edison was a failure. Everybody is a failure, but that's okay. We learn lessons from it. Next slide. Still slow. Okay, so this is just trait of geniuses. I don't want to go too much in detail, but this comes from a nice article I found on the web, and you learn not only from your own mistake, but others' mistakes. That's the most important one. Building upon other people's knowledge, like not reinventing the wheel and stuff like that. Having a clear vision is very important. Building multi-dimensional knowledge. That's 4 things I always talk about. I think Prathamesh knows. Find the root cause of analysis for every failure you have. Understand the engineering of systems or systems engineering. Have a multidisciplinary knowledge. In my own career, I worked in railroads to start with in America, and then mining, helicopters, commercial airplanes, and NASA in 10 years. And you say what railroads need work you did in NASA. Yes, every single part on the big rocket launch pad for the shuttle moved on railroad tracks, so it's important that I became instant success there. Next slide. I think you can go to the. Yeah, this is just again something for you to chew on. If you want to become an astronaut maker or a good engineer, I think self-esteem is the most important thing. Have no fear and take all the risks, and that's about it. Prathamesh, let's go to the video. So I just want to leave you with one last video. You can go to the video and play that. So this video is self-explanatory. If you don't hear the sound, don't worry about it. Okay, we'll take about 5 questions, Pratmesh, and I can repeat the question or.
Yeah, sure. Rituja, Chinmay, can you go ahead with the questions?
We can present the results of the Slido poll here.
Sure, go ahead with that.
Let me check whether I can share my screen.
Yeah.
Is it? Can you see?
Yeah, yes, we can see.
Okay, so these are the questions.
Okay, you want me to just answer the questions as we go along?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, so you are going to scroll it, I guess, once we answer the question. Yeah. Okay, 1 second. Can you go back? Yeah. So Tipu Sultan, he had the rockets from, this rocket technology came from China originally, and these were fireworks and firecrackers and many new small technologies they had developed, like lanterns and flying lanterns and things like that. And basically, he brought the technology. It slowly evolved into India because of I don't know, Diwali or whatever that thing is. We used to fire bottle rockets from when we were in Mumbai, and same thing. He took the bottle rocket where it had a stem and a fuel at the top, and then and a fuse at the top, and he modified it into like metal containers and stuff like that. And he looked at the trajectory and how far it can go and how long is the stick has to be. So because in those days the warfare was like face to face, he made sure that it could land about 300 feet away or some 100 meters away or something like that. So he used his people in his in under him, right, in his country, or under his Raj, to try to develop all these technologies. So I'm sure I haven't read anything much about it, except he developed new fuels and new metallic structures, new ways to develop the trajectory and stuff like that. My academic journey was like undergrad in Bangalore, India, RV College of Engineering, mechanical engineering. Then I came to IIT Chicago in 1975 on a tourist visa and stayed here. So basically, I got my master's in aerospace engineering, aerospace mechanical. Then I worked in railroads and mining and helicopters, commercial airplanes and NASA in 10 years, from 78 to 89. And also have an MBA in finance and marketing and PhD in management. SpaceX is successful. I think yeah, it is successful because it got a lot of support from NASA. Basically, we gave them the NASA Launchpad, a lot of NASA technologies. They developed their own technologies, and a lot of times people say, oh, they're going to land the first stage. It goes up in space, and they can land picture perfectly on the launch pad, on the ground, or in the boat, or on the boat. I mean, NASA did that 100 times on the space shuttle. 135 times we sent a rocket with humans there, and also we did on the Apollo. We landed on the moon and came back. So basically, there's not much new technology there, except he's famous because he's just trying to and this is a time when NASA didn't have to rely on Russians to send people to ISS. So SpaceX got all the benefits. So really, they are taking a lot of NASA technology, which was what NASA is designed to. We are not designed to, as a company, we have to promote space by giving away the technology, So that's why you think SpaceX is more, because NASA is more relying on them right now. I guess that's about it. Nothing. They haven't done extraordinary. Let's put it this way in terms of innovation, So how to well, I think going to Mars would really depend on how we live and work on the ISS. Basically, sending humans that far away will require understanding of human physiology and how, like 1% of bone mass you lose per month. Every month you'll stay in space. So it's very important for us to understand how the bones and muscle behave for a long duration travel in space and stuff like that. So that would be the key question, and how to develop food and livable conditions on Mars, which we are trying to do on grow food on the ISS and stuff like that. So obviously, Maslow's law of hierarchy, right? Food and shelter. Really, all you need is basically humans need is food every day, food and water, and a roof. That's all we need. Mars is tougher because it has all the solar conditions where we can live in underground tunnels and things like that. So, what are key questions space science technology can solve for planet? You are looking around, basically, you take everything you see from GPS to internet to, I wouldn't say everything was developed by NASA, but it has offshoots from NASA. There was a requirement to go to space for military, Defense Department or NASA, and then this requirement was given to university or company, and these companies developed the technology. So what you see today, 50 years ago, as I said, I didn't even have a slide rule. I didn't have a log table, no calculators. There was no TV in my house, no refrigerator. I mean, we had refrigerators, but I didn't have one. So all these technologies, we developed since 1950s. I mean, not 50s, 70s on. Is all because of stuff like that.
Abhiyangi, you can mail your questions to us if you have any. That won't be possible, so we can move to the next question.
Yeah, so basically we'll take one question more. Can space science help accelerate solve climate change? Yes, that's what we are doing. I just came back from Greenland, and NASA is spending 60 years of their time in Greenland looking at a glacier called Jacobshavn, and it's melting actually. If you track it, I went to the glacier and I saw how it is melting. And in fact, if you look at the small town of Ilulissat, which is on the west coast of Greenland, from there, from the Jacobshavn glacier, a big iceberg broke and it came down all the way down and hit the Titanic. So if you know what happened to Titanic got hit by iceberg, or Titanic hit the iceberg, and that iceberg came from glaciers up north, near Greenland. I think that's Prathamesh's question. I guess we'll skip that. Okay, one more question and we'll be done, Prathamesh.
Yeah, I don't see any questions. There's Zafira. I guess she wants to talk with you. Shall I pull her up?
Yeah, just one last question.
Okay, sir.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Zafira.
Yeah, go ahead.
Zafira here, sir. Good to see you again.
Go ahead.
Actually, sir, my question was that has there ever been such a failure that has taken NASA a long time to cope up with?
No, typically the failures have been 2 to 3 years long, where we shut down everything. And that is the big thing about NASA. I think they put hundreds of people to work, hundreds of thousands of people to work. Even in Apollo, which was really a big deal, Apollo 13, even people from MIT professors, Canadian professors working on the models, because we had to dynamically change the GPS signal, not GPS, but the plan. Dynamically change the plan instead of going to the moon, we had to change the program and send it to a probe to come back to the Earth. So all these things were very difficult. Yes, we had problems with Apollo 1, took about 3 years. Columbia and Challenger about 2 to 3 years. So typically those are the time frames we are looking at, and it will be always a challenge. Space is dangerous. It's not an easy job. I tell them it's not like flipping burgers or pizza. So everybody wants to go to space and they launch tiny rockets. No, we have to do much more. We want to launch big rockets, and so have your dream high. Don't settle for very small dreams. So basically, it's always good to dream high, and even if you fail, that's okay. Somebody else will be there. Just like Von Braun said, if space flight is not for me, let it be for the others. And same with Leonardo, he said, if flying is not for me, let it be for others. So you do something. So there's a nice quote by Benjamin Franklin, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing about. So that's the quote I want to leave you with. Good luck to all of you, and I better get off now. So goodbye. Take care.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful webinar, and we are glad that we could do this motivating webinar for everyone. I guess everyone has learned something.
Just wanted to add one more thing. On March 5th, there's a lecture in Chandigarh University. It's about launching Kalpana Chawla in the realm of the astronaut makers, and I just heard from the Chandigarh University saying that anybody can attend it. I think they're going to put it on LinkedIn. I don't know yet, but if not, then NSS Mumbai will put on LinkedIn. So if you want to listen, I got to launch Kalpana Chawla twice in space, and obviously second time she didn't come back. So and we'll just talk about how to launch astronauts and how we launched astronauts and how we brought them back safely, and maybe once or twice not so safely. So, okay, good luck. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope you all have enjoyed the webinar, and please feel free to subscribe our YouTube channel. We'll be putting this entire video there, and do follow us on our social media. Thank you.